Neighbors laughed at his house made of plastic bottles, until they discovered the reason. Frank Harrison was crouched under the morning sun, fitting another plastic bottle into the row that was slowly growing around the wooden structure. The laughter from the sidewalk echoed through the Hope Gardens neighborhood in Indianapolis, but he didn't even look up to see who was mocking him this time. His daughter Chloe came running down the street, her heels hitting the asphalt hard, her face red with anger. She had just left her job at the bank when she received a message from a co-worker with a video of the unusual construction, accompanied by laughing emojis. "Dad, for God's sake, what is this?" Chloe shouted before even reaching the gate. "The whole city is laughing at our family." Frank kept working, his experienced hands positioning each bottle with mathematical precision. At 52, he still had the strength from his days working in construction, but now his movements were more calculated, as if each bottle were a vital piece of a huge puzzle. "Chloe, when you were little, I taught you that we shouldn't care what others think when we're doing the right thing," he replied without stopping his work. "The right thing?" Chloe looked at the structure that looked more like a crazy experiment than a house. "Dad, this isn't normal. People are filming it, posting it on social media. My boss already asked me if you're okay in the head." Martha appeared in the doorway of the house they still lived in, a simple 2-bedroom construction that Frank had bought with great effort 20 years ago. She dried her hands on her apron, watching the argument between her husband and daughter with an expression of weariness that had become constant in recent months. "Frank, Chloe is right. People are starting to make cruel jokes. Mrs. Gladys from the corner said you've lost your mind." Martha spoke softly, but there was a firmness behind the words that Frank knew well. "I haven't lost my mind. You'll understand when it's ready." Frank finally stopped working and looked at the 2 women he loved. "Trust me, please." Chloe crossed her arms, her frustration growing. She was 28, with a degree in business administration, and saw her father as a sensible man who had always made practical decisions. This sudden change in behavior genuinely worried her. "Trust? Dad, you spent all your savings buying plastic bottles. Mr. Barney from the recycling center told me you're paying 3 times the market price for them. We're running out of money for basic things." It was then that Frank showed the first crack in his unshakable determination. His eyes filled with water, but he quickly looked away so they wouldn't see. "Chloe, sweetheart, I know it seems crazy, but if you give me a little more time—" "More time?" Martha interrupted. "Frank, you've been working on this thing for 4 months, 4 months, and not once have you properly explained what you're doing or why." The neighbors who had stopped to watch the argument began to disperse when they saw the conversation getting serious. Among them was Victor Sullivan, a 45-year-old businessman who owned a building supply store in the area. He had a strong personality and well-formed opinions about practically everything. Victor approached the gate with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was the kind of man who liked to always be right and was bothered when someone did something he couldn't understand or control. "Excuse me, folks," Victor called the family's attention. "I didn't want to intrude, but as a representative of the Homeowners Association, I need to say something." Frank stood up slowly, wiping the dirt from his hands on his faded jeans. He had known Victor for years, but they had never had a longer conversation. The businessman had always seemed to him like the type of person who judged others by the appearance of things. "You can speak, Victor," Frank replied with forced politeness. "Look, Frank, I know everyone has the right to do what they want on their property, but this construction—" Victor gestured toward the rows of plastic bottles. "This is devaluing the whole neighborhood. People come here just to take pictures and laugh. It's not good for any of us." Chloe lowered her head, feeling ashamed. It was exactly what she feared would happen. The Hope Gardens neighborhood was an up-and-coming lower-middle-class area, and she dreamed of being able to buy a better house there when she got married. Now, with her father's invention, her plans seemed to be crumbling. "Victor, with all due respect, I'm not doing anything illegal." Frank kept his voice calm, but there was a firmness that Martha recognized from the times he faced problems at work. "No, it's not illegal, but it's—" Victor searched for the right word. "It's weird, and too weird is not good for a community that's trying to grow." Martha felt she needed to defend her husband, even though she didn't fully understand what he was doing. "Victor, Frank has always been a hard-working and honest man. If he's doing this, he must have a reason." "A reason?" Victor laughed scornfully. What reason could he have for building a house with recycled trash when there's real construction material? Look, I can give you a good discount at my store, brick, cement, all top quality. Frank looked at Victor for a few seconds, as if carefully weighing his words. Thank you for the offer, but it's not a question of money, Victor. Not a question of money. Victor looked around, seeing the simple house where the family lived, the old car parked on the street. Frank, no offense, but from what I see, money is indeed an issue for you. Why not build something normal that adds value instead of taking it away? That's when Frank lost his patience for the first time since he had started the construction. You know what, Victor? Not everyone in this world is lucky enough to be able to buy construction material at your store. Some people need different solutions, and those different solutions can be better than anything you sell. Better? Victor guffawed. Frank, this is trash. Plastic bottles are trash. How can it be better than brick and cement? Chloe intervened before the argument heated up further. Dad, let's go inside. We don't need to argue in the street. But Frank didn't move. Something had changed in his expression, as if Victor had touched a sensitive point he had been holding on to for a long time. Victor, have you ever in your life seen an entire family lose everything in a flood? Have you seen children sleeping out in the open because the brick and cement house that was so good crumbled like sugar in water? The question took Victor by surprise. He opened his mouth to respond, but Frank continued. I have, and I've also seen those same families unable to rebuild their homes because brick and cement cost a fortune they don't have. So don't come and talk to me about trash, because maybe what you call trash is the only hope some people have. Victor was uncomfortable with the intensity of Frank's response. He didn't expect such a direct and emotional challenge. Look, Frank, I didn't mean to offend. It's just that... You just what? Frank took a step forward. You just think you know what's best for everyone, that your way of seeing the world is the only right one. Martha touched her husband's arm, trying to calm him down. She rarely saw him so agitated, and that worried her more than the strange construction itself. Frank, that's enough. Let's go inside. Victor clapped slowly, sarcastically. Very nice speech, Frank, very nice indeed. But at the end of the day, you're here in Hope Gardens, building this weird thing that's bothering your neighbors. If you want to help the poor, why don't you go do that in the slums? Victor's question made Frank's blood boil. Chloe saw her father's fists clench and ran to position herself between the two men. Enough! Both of you, enough! She shouted. Victor, please mind your own business. Dad, let's go inside now. Victor shrugged and started to walk away, but couldn't resist having the last word. Just a warning, Frank. The Homeowners Association is meeting next Thursday, and your construction will be on the agenda. After Victor walked away, the family stood in silence for a few moments. The tension still hung in the air like the dust the wind kicked up from the construction site. Frank, Martha said softly, what was that? What's this story about a flood and families losing everything? Frank looked at his wife with an expression she couldn't completely decipher. There was pain there, and also a determination that seemed to come from deep within. Martha, do you remember my brother Stephen? Of course I remember. The one who works in social services in rural Ohio. It's not just social services. He coordinates the rebuilding of communities hit by natural disasters. Floods, mainly. Chloe looked at her father with renewed interest. She barely remembered Uncle Stephen, who rarely visited the family when she was a child. And what does that have to do with... Chloe gestured toward the construction. With that? Frank took a deep breath, as if about to reveal a secret he'd kept for a long time. It has to do with everything, honey. Everything. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. That night, at the small kitchen table where the family always ate dinner, the mood was heavy. Martha had made fried eggs and hash browns, a simple meal that reflected the state of the household finances. Frank pushed the food around on his plate, clearly lost in thought. Dad, Chloe broke the silence, can you at least tell us why you're doing that? I'm not asking you to stop, I just want to understand. Frank raised his eyes and saw his wife and daughter looking at him expectantly. He had kept that project to himself for so long that talking about it seemed almost impossible. "It's complicated, Chloe." "Then uncomplicate it." Martha crossed her arms. "Frank, we are your family. 25 years married, and I've never seen you hide something so much from me." Frank set his fork aside and leaned back in his chair. The yellowish light from the kitchen lamp made his face look more tired than it really was. "Do you remember when I lost my job at Miller & Sons Construction?" "Of course," Martha replied. "You said there were cuts and your department was eliminated." "I lied." The silence that followed was so intense you could hear the neighbors' television. Chloe and Martha exchanged a worried look. "What do you mean you lied?" Chloe asked in a low voice. "I wasn't laid off due to cuts. I was fired because I presented a project they considered unrealistic for the company's standards." Martha leaned forward, her features showing a mix of confusion and hurt. "What kind of project, Frank?" "Affordable housing using recycled materials, specifically plastic bottles." The revelation landed on the table like a bomb. Chloe was the first to react. "You lost your job because of plastic bottles?" "I lost my job because I tried to convince a profit-focused company to invest in something that would help people who can't afford their services," Frank explained, his voice taking on a bitter tone. "For 2 years I developed calculations, tested materials, created detailed plans. When I finally presented everything to the board, they laughed in my face." Martha placed her hand on the table near Frank's, but without touching him yet. "Why didn't you tell us the truth back then?" "Because I was ashamed," Frank admitted, lowering his head. "Ashamed of being considered crazy by the company I worked for 15 years. Ashamed of losing our livelihood over an idea that not even you would understand." "But Frank," Chloe spoke carefully, "even if the idea was good, why are you spending our savings on it? Wouldn't it be better to look for another job and leave this for later?" Frank rose from the table and walked to the kitchen window, from where he could see his unfinished construction in the backyard. The plastic bottles glowed faintly under the streetlight. "Chloe, do you think I didn't try to get another job? Do you think it was easy spending 2 years doing odd jobs, earning money as a day laborer, being treated as if I were incompetent?" Martha finally stood up and approached her husband. "Frank, you never seemed incompetent to me. Never, but why didn't you tell me what you were going through?" "Because I was embarrassed, Martha." Frank turned to her, and for the first time his voice rose in tone. "Embarrassed to be 50 years old and unemployed. Embarrassed to have a college graduate daughter earning more money than her father. Embarrassed that I can't give you the life you deserve." The words echoed through the small kitchen, and Frank immediately regretted speaking so loudly. Chloe rose from the table, her eyes welling up. "Dad, I never judged you for being unemployed. I know, honey. The problem is, I judged myself." Martha touched her husband's arm, finally making the physical contact she had been avoiding. "And does this construction have to do with your self-esteem?" Frank laughed bitterly. "It has to do with the last chance I have to prove I'm not crazy, that my idea works, that I can contribute something to this world before I become just another retired old man who spends the day complaining about life." Chloe moved closer to her parents, forming a small circle in the kitchen. "But Dad, even if the idea works, what will that change? Will you be able to go back to working in engineering?" "It's not about working again, Chloe," Frank explained patiently. "It's about leaving something useful for the people who really need it. It's about proving that a house can be good, sturdy, and affordable at the same time." "But one house alone doesn't prove anything," Martha observed. "It's just a house." Frank smiled for the first time that evening. "Who said it's just a house?" Before Martha or Chloe could ask what he meant, the house phone rang. It was almost 9 at night, an unusual time for calls. Martha answered. "Hello?" "Martha, it's Stephen. Stephen, Frank's brother." Martha looked at her husband in surprise. Stephen, the brother who lived in rural Ohio, called maybe once a year, usually at Christmas. "Stephen, what a surprise. Is everything okay?" "Yes, sis. I wanted to talk to Frank. It's important." Martha passed the phone to her husband, who seemed to tense up upon hearing his brother's name. "Hi, Stephen." Chloe and Martha watched Frank during the phone conversation, trying to understand the content from the side they could hear. Yes, No, it's not ready yet. What do you mean tomorrow? Stephen, I don't know if... Okay, yes, they can stay here at the house and see you tomorrow. Frank hung up the phone and turned to his wife and daughter, who were looking at him expectantly. Stephen is coming tomorrow, and he's bringing some people with him. What people? Martha asked. People who lost their homes in the New Orleans flood last month. Chloe felt a chill in her stomach. They're going to stay here at our house. Just for one night. They're coming to... Frank hesitated. To see the construction. To see your construction? Martha repeated, incredulous. Frank, what is this about? Frank looked at the two women and realized the moment had come to tell the whole truth. I'm not building this house just for us, Martha. I'm building it to teach other people how to build theirs. The impact of the revelation left mother and daughter speechless for a few moments. Then Chloe exploded. You mean you're spending our money to build a house that isn't even ours? Chloe, it's not like that. Not like what? Chloe's voice rose an octave. Dad, we're having financial difficulties. You're being humiliated by the neighbors. Mum is suffering, and now I find out this isn't even for us. Frank tried to approach his daughter, but she moved away. Honey, let me explain. Explain what? Chloe was clearly upset. That you preferred helping strangers over taking care of your own family? Chloe, Martha scolded, but her own voice trembled with emotion. No, Mom. Chloe turned to Martha. Can't you see it too? Daddy has lost touch with reality. He thinks he's some kind of social savior or something. Frank felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. The anger and disappointment in his daughter's voice were worse than all the neighbors' mockery. Chloe, you're being unfair, he said quietly. Unfair? Chloe laughed bitterly. Dad, unfair is spending money we don't have on a project that will benefit other people while we can barely pay our bills here. The bills are being paid, Frank replied defensively. Barely. And for how much longer? You've already spent $4,000 on plastic bottles. $4,000, Dad, that would pay for a year's rent. Martha was shocked by the amount. Frank had never mentioned exactly how much he was spending. $4,000, Frank, she asked in a weak voice. It was necessary, Frank stammered. Necessary for what? To impress people we don't even know? Chloe crossed her arms. You know what? I can't take it anymore. I can't stand being the town's laughingstock because of my father's obsession. Chloe stormed out of the kitchen and slammed her bedroom door. Martha and Frank were left alone, the sound of the neighbor's television now seeming very distant. Martha, Frank began. No, Frank, not now. Martha shook her head. Shook. I need to process all of this. You lied about the layoff, spent our savings without properly consulting me, and now I find out all of this isn't even for our family. Martha, please, let me explain. Explain what? That our family isn't a priority for you. That your social projects are more important than our stability. Frank tried to hold his wife's hand, but she pulled away. It's not that, Martha. It's that there's a bigger world out there, people who need... Frank! Martha interrupted him firmly. I exist. Chloe exists. We need you too. Martha left the kitchen, leaving Frank alone with his thoughts and the weight of the words he had just heard. He sat back down at the table and looked at the plates with food still half-eaten. From Chloe's room came the muffled sound of crying. From the room he shared with Martha, only silence. Frank put his head in his hands and, for the first time since he had started the construction, questioned whether he was doing the right thing. Outside, his plastic bottle construction remained under the streetlight, a physical reminder of all the conflicts it had created. The bottles glowed faintly, each one representing a small portion of the family's savings and a large portion of the pain it was causing the people he loved most. Frank stayed in the kitchen very late that night, looking out the window and trying to find a way to reconcile his dreams with his family's reality. The problem was, the more he thought about it, the more he realized there might not be an easy solution. The next day, Frank woke up early, even before the alarm went off. Martha was lying with her back to him, and he couldn't tell if she was asleep or just pretending to sleep to avoid a conversation. Chloe had left the house very early for work, leaving only a note saying she would be back late. Frank took a shower, made a simple coffee, and went to the backyard to work on the construction. Even with all the conflicts from the night before, he couldn't abandon the project. It was as if his hands had a life of their own when he was near the plastic bottles. Around 9 in the morning, a white pickup truck stopped in front of the house. From the driver's side emerged a tall, thin man with graying hair and a bit of stubble. It was Stephen, Frank's brother, whom he hadn't seen in almost 2 years. From the passenger side emerged 3 people, a woman around 40 with a child of about 8, and an older man, perhaps in his 60s. They all carried simple bundles and had on their faces the expression of those who had recently been through hard times. Frank stopped working and went to greet them at the gate. Stephen approached his brother with a tired smile. "Frank, how are you, bro?" The brothers hugged, and Frank noticed Stephen was thinner than he remembered. "I'm fine, Stephen. And you? How was the trip?" "Long, but peaceful." Stephen turned to introduce the others. "Frank, this is Brenda, Tyler, and Mr. Arthur, brave people who lost everything in the New Orleans flood and came here to see what you're doing." Brenda, a woman with brown hair tied in a ponytail and hands calloused from work, approached Frank with a shy smile. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Frank. Stephen has told us a lot about you." "The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Brenda," Frank replied, but inside he was nervous. His construction wasn't finished yet, and he felt uncomfortable showing something incomplete to people who really needed a solution. Tyler, the 8-year-old boy, looked fascinated at the rows of plastic bottles forming the walls of the structure. He had never seen anything like it. "Uncle Frank," he said in a thin voice, "is this house real?" Frank smiled, despite his nervousness. "Yes, Tyler, it's almost ready." Mr. Arthur, a man with dark skin and huge hands, approached the construction with curiosity. "Can I take a closer look?" "Of course, Mr. Arthur. Make yourselves at home." While the visitors examined the construction, Stephen pulled Frank aside. "Bro, I need to talk to you. The situation in New Orleans is critical. We have over 200 families without homes, and the government still hasn't managed to provide temporary housing for everyone." 200 families? Frank repeated, feeling the weight of responsibility. "And that's just in New Orleans. There was flooding in Baton Rouge, in Gulfport, in several towns. Frank, I've never seen such a desperate situation." Frank looked at Brenda, who was explaining something about construction to her son Tyler while pointing at the bottles. "Stephen, my family is in crisis because of this project. Martha thinks I've lost my mind. Chloe won't even talk to me." "And do you think you have?" Frank hesitated before answering. "Sometimes I think so. Sometimes I look at all this and think maybe I'm being selfish, forcing my family to pay the price for a dream that might not even work." Stephen put his hand on his brother's shoulder. "Frank, do you remember when we were kids, and you always said you wanted to be an engineer to build houses for the poor?" "I remember." "Do you remember what happened to Joe Miller's family when their shack collapsed in the rain?" Frank closed his eyes. He was 10 years old when it happened in his hometown. Joe Miller's family, who lived in a shack made of wood and cardboard, lost everything in a storm. They spent months living under the bridge until they could save up enough money to start over. "I remember. You spent a whole week saying that when you grew up, you were going to invent a way to make houses that wouldn't fall down in the rain and that the poor could afford." Frank opened his eyes and looked at Stephen. "That was 40 years ago, Stephen. So what? Do you think the problem is over? Do you think there aren't any more Joe Miller families in the world?" Before Frank could answer, Brenda approached the brothers, her eyes shining with emotion. "Mr. Frank, can you teach me how to do that?" "How to do what, Mrs. Brenda?" "The house. Can you teach me how to build a house with plastic bottles?" Frank looked at Stephen, then at Brenda, then at the unfinished construction. "Mrs. Brenda, this isn't ready yet. I don't even know if it will work properly." "But I know it will," Brenda said with conviction. "Look, I lost my house a month ago. It was a simple little house, but it was mine. The water took everything. Brick, plaster, roof tiles, everything. In 2 hours, 20 years of my life turned to mud." Frank felt a tightness in his chest. The pain in Brenda's voice was the same pain he imagined in the families he had dreamed of helping. "And insurance? Didn't the government help? Insurance? Brenda laughed without humor. Mr. Frank, I worked as a cleaner. I earned $1.50 above minimum wage to support myself and Tyler. What was left after food, clothes, and school barely covered the rent for the land the house was on. Insurance was a luxury I couldn't afford. Mr. Arthur approached the group. He had been examining the structure of the construction in detail. Can I give my opinion on this construction? Of course, Mr. Arthur. I've worked in construction for 30 years. I've seen everything in this life. And I can say that this structure here is more solid than many brick houses I've seen around. Frank felt a wave of relief. You really think so? I don't think, I know. These bottles are fitted together in a way that distributes the weight intelligently. The material is durable, and with the right finishing, this will last for decades. Stephen smiled at his brother. See? I told you your idea was good. But there's a problem, Mr. Arthur continued. Frank's heart raced. What problem? The price. From what Stephen explained to me on the road, you're paying way too much for the plastic bottles. If we're going to teach the technique to those who really need it, we have to find a way to make the material cheaper. Frank hadn't thought of that. He had been so focused on making the construction work that he hadn't thought about large-scale reproduction. What do you mean, make it cheaper? Partnerships, Brenda suggested. Recycling cooperatives, soda companies, city halls. There must be a way to get the bottles for a better price, or even for free. Tyler, who had been playing among the plastic bottles, ran to his mother. Mom, can I live in a house like this? Brenda looked at her son tenderly and then at Frank. Yes, son. If Mr. Frank teaches Mommy how to do it, we'll have a new house. At that moment, Martha appeared at the back door of the house. She had been watching the conversation from the kitchen window and decided to join the group. Good morning, everyone, she greeted politely. Martha! Stephen approached his sister-in-law. It's good to see you. Stephen, what a surprise. How are things over there? Difficult, sister-in-law, very difficult. Martha looked at Brenda and Tyler, and her maternal heart immediately softened upon seeing the child and mother with that look of having gone through hardships. You must be hungry. I'll fix a snack. No need to trouble yourself, Mrs. Brenda began. Martha, and it's no trouble at all. Make yourselves at home. While Martha prepared sandwiches in the kitchen, Frank showed all the construction details to the visitors. Mr. Arthur asked smart technical questions. Brenda took mental notes about the process, and Tyler simply had fun exploring the unusual structure. Mr. Frank, Brenda asked, how long did it take you to learn how to do this? Actually, I've been studying this for years, but the actual construction I started 4 months ago. And you learned by yourself? Not by myself, Frank looked at Stephen. My brother would send me pictures of collapsed houses, reports about homeless families, specific problems he faced in his work. That helped me understand what kind of solution was needed. Stephen nodded. Frank was always the brains of the family. I saw the problems, but he was the one who thought of the solutions. Mr. Arthur clapped his hands to get the group's attention. Look, everyone, I have a proposal. What if we did a test? What kind of test? Frank asked. Let's finish this house here in Indianapolis all together. I'll help with the labor. Brenda helps with the finishing. Stephen coordinates. And you, Frank, teach the technique. When it's done, we go back to New Orleans and build the first house there. Brenda clapped her hands with joy. I would love that. That way I'd learn everything properly. Frank looked at the house where he lived with his family and hesitated. It's a good idea, but I don't know if my family will agree. Agree to what? Martha appeared carrying a tray with sandwiches and juice. Stephen quickly explained the proposal to Martha, who listened attentively to everything. And you'd be staying here? She asked. If it's not a bother, Brenda replied. We can stay in the yard. We don't need a room. Martha looked at Frank, then at Brenda and Tyler, then at the plastic bottle construction that intrigued her so much. It's no bother. You can stay in Chloe's room. She's been sleeping in the living room anyway because of her studies for a civil service exam. Frank was surprised by his wife's generosity, considering the discussion they'd had the night before. Martha, are you sure? I am, she replied firmly, but I have one condition. Everyone looked at her expectantly. I want to understand everything you're doing. Every step, every decision, every technique. If I'm going to have a construction site in my backyard, I want to know exactly what it's about." Frank smiled for the first time in days. "You got it. You'll be the project's first official student." During lunch, which Martha prepared by stretching the family's food for 5 people, the conversation flowed naturally. Brenda talked about her life before the flood, Mr. Arthur spoke about his experiences in construction, and Stephen recounted cases of other families he had helped over the years. Tyler, who was initially shy, soon opened up and started asking 1,000 questions about building with plastic bottles. Martha watched everything carefully, seeing how Frank transformed when he talked about the project. It was a version of her husband she hadn't seen in a long time, passionate, confident, instructive. "Mr. Frank," Tyler asked with his mouth full of sandwich, "after my mom learns how to make a bottle house, can she teach other people?" "Of course she can, Tyler. In fact, that's the main idea. One person teaches another who teaches another, and so on." "Like a virus?" Tyler asked innocently, making everyone laugh. "Yeah, Tyler," Frank laughed. "Like a virus. But a good virus, one that spreads knowledge instead of disease." Brenda looked at Frank with a serious expression. "Mr. Frank, can I ask a personal question?" "Of course." "Why are you doing this? I mean, you don't know me, you don't know Arthur, you have no obligation to help us. Why are you spending your time and money on strangers?" The question left the table in silence. It was exactly the same question Chloe had asked the night before, but asked in a completely different way. Frank looked around the table, seeing all the faces turned toward him. "You know, Mrs. Brenda, I spent most of my life building houses for rich people. Big, beautiful houses with expensive materials, for families who already had a place to live. And it always bothered me to know that at the same time there were families with no roof over their heads." "But that's not your fault," Martha observed. "It's not my fault, but it is my responsibility. I have knowledge that can help people. If I don't use that knowledge, who will?" Mr. Arthur nodded vigorously. "I think the same thing. I've worked in construction for 30 years. I've learned a lot. If I keep it all to myself, what's the point?" "That's exactly it." Frank became animated. "Knowledge that isn't shared is wasted knowledge." Stephen smiled at his brother. "Now you're understanding why I insisted that Frank continue with this project, even when everyone said he was crazy." "Everyone?" Brenda asked. Martha answered with a sigh. "The neighbors think Frank has lost his mind. They make jokes, take pictures, some even suggested he seek medical help." "And you think that?" Brenda asked Martha directly. Martha looked at her husband for a few moments before answering. "I thought he was running away from reality, spending money we don't have on something that wasn't going to work. But today, seeing you all here, hearing your stories, I think I was the one running away from reality." "How so?" Frank asked, surprised. "I was only thinking about our family, our problems, our situation. But there are people in situations much worse than ours, and if you can help those people, then maybe that's what we should be doing." The transformation in Martha's attitude surprised Frank. It was as if meeting Brenda and Tyler in person had completely changed her perspective on the project. "Martha, are you sure about this?" Frank asked cautiously. "I am, but I have one condition." "What?" "We're going to do this right, with planning, with organization, with spending control. If we're going to help people, we're going to really help them, not just any old way." Brenda clapped her hands. "Yes. A woman always organizes everything better anyway." "Whoa, whoa, whoa," Mr. Arthur protested playfully. "Watch the sexism there, Mrs. Brenda." The whole table laughed, and Frank felt an emotion he hadn't experienced in months. Hope that maybe it was possible to reconcile his family with his project. After lunch, Martha called Frank for a private conversation in the living room. "Frank, I haven't changed my mind about you lying to me about the layoff. That still hurts me." "I know, Martha. And I'm sorry about that. But seeing these people today, I understood something I didn't want to understand before." "What?" "That maybe you're right about social responsibility. Maybe we really do have an obligation to help those in need when we can help." Frank held his wife's hands. "Martha, I never wanted to put the project above our family. I just wanted our family to be part of something bigger. And now I want that too. But Frank, promise me one thing. Anything. Promise you won't hide anything from me anymore. If we're going to do this, we'll do it together with total transparency. I promise. They embraced, and Frank felt that perhaps the greatest obstacle to his project had just become his greatest ally. In the afternoon, when Chloe arrived from work, she found the house full of people and was visibly annoyed. "Mum, who are these people?" she asked Marlene quietly. "They're people your father is going to help with the house project." "How wonderful," Chloe replied sarcastically. "Now we've become a boarding house." "Chloe, be polite," Marlene scolded. "These people lost everything in a flood." "So what? Why do they have to be our problem?" Brenda, who was in the kitchen helping Marlene prepare dinner, overheard Chloe's comment and felt embarrassed. "Mrs. Martha, maybe it's better if we look for a cheap boarding house in the city." "Don't be silly, Brenda. Chloe is just tired from work." But Chloe heard the conversation and felt guilty for making Brenda feel bad. "You don't have to leave," Chloe said, entering the kitchen. "Sorry if I was rude. It's just that It's complicated." Brenda smiled understandingly. "I get it, honey. Change is never easy for anyone. It's just that I don't understand my father's obsession with this project. It seems like he doesn't think about anything else." "Can I tell you something?" Brenda dried her hands on the dish towel and sat down next to Chloe. "Your father isn't doing this out of obsession. He's doing it out of love." "Love?" Chloe laughed incredulously. "Love for who?" "For people like me and my son. People he doesn't even know, but he knows they need help." Chloe fell silent, processing Brenda's words. "But why can't he just donate money to an institution and be done with it?" "Because money runs out, Chloe. Knowledge doesn't run out. If your father teaches me how to build a house, I can teach 10 other people. Those 10 people can teach 100 more. It's a gift that keeps on giving." Chloe had never thought of her father's project that way. To her, it had always seemed like just an expensive and embarrassing whim. "And you really believe this will work? That people will learn and teach others?" "I believe because I need to believe," Brenda answered honestly. "Chloe, I lost everything. Everything. The only things I have left are my son and my will to start over. If your father is offering me a way to start over, I'm going to grab that opportunity with all my strength." Chloe looked through the kitchen window and saw her father explaining some technical detail to Mr. Arthur while Tyler played among the plastic bottles. "How did you all hear about my father's project?" "Through Uncle Stephen. He said he had a brother who was an engineer developing a cheap, sturdy building technique. Since we had nothing to lose, we decided to come see. And if it doesn't work, if the house collapses or has problems, then we'll leave and try something else," Brenda shrugged. "Chloe, when you have nothing, any chance is worth taking." Brenda's words touched Chloe in a way she didn't expect. For the first time, she began to see her father's project through the eyes of those who truly needed it. "Brenda, can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "How do you manage to keep hope after losing everything?" Brenda thought for a few moments before answering. "I keep hope because I have Tyler. He needs to see that even when everything goes wrong, we don't give up. We find a way to keep going." Chloe looked at Tyler, who was laughing as her father explained how the bottles fit together. He was a happy child, despite having lost his home not long ago. "He seems to be handling this whole situation well." Children adapt more easily than adults. For him, this is an adventure. For me, it's a chance to rebuild our lives. Chloe watched the scene outside for a few minutes. Gradually, a new understanding began to form in her mind. "Brenda, do you think my father is a dreamer?" "I think your father is a man who wants to leave the world a little better than he found it. If that's dreaming, then we need more dreamers in the world." That night, during dinner, the atmosphere in the house was completely different. Chloe was participating in the conversations. Martha was asking technical questions about the construction, and Frank was visibly more relaxed and happy. "Mr. Frank," Tyler asked, "can I help with the construction tomorrow?" "Of course, Tyler. You can be my official assistant." "That's so cool. I've never built a house before." "Nobody is born knowing how to build a house, Tyler," Mr. Arthur observed. "You learn by doing." That's true, Chloe agreed, surprising everyone. I never thought I'd one day be learning about construction with plastic bottles. Frank looked at his daughter with hope. You want to learn? Chloe hesitated for a few moments. Maybe, if it's not too complicated. It's not complicated, Brenda assured her. Your father explains everything in a way that's very easy to understand. All right then, I can help on weekends. Frank felt his heart would burst with happiness. Having his family support the project was more than he had dreamed of. How about we make a schedule, Martha suggested, to organize the construction phases and define who does what? Good idea, Stephen agreed. In my work, organization is fundamental to the success of any project. They spent the rest of the night planning the coming weeks. Mr. Arthur estimated that, working every day, they could finish the house in 2 weeks. Brenda offered to research recycling cooperatives to lower the cost of the plastic bottles. Chloe said she could use her administration knowledge to create a system for tracking expenses and materials. Frank looked around the table and saw something he never expected to see: his family and his beneficiaries working together as a team. It was exactly what he had dreamed of, but never knew how to achieve. Everyone, he said, moved, I want to thank you all. Thank us for what? Chloe asked. For believing in me, for giving me the chance to prove this idea can work. Frank, Martha put her hand over his, we always believed in you. Sometimes it was just hard to understand where you wanted to go. And now you understand? Now we understand, Chloe answered with a smile, and we're going to help you get there. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. The next morning, Frank woke up before sunrise. It was Saturday, and for the first time since the construction began, he wasn't anxious or worried. He had a full team to work with, and more importantly, he had his family's support. While making coffee, he heard movement in the room where Brenda and Tyler were staying. Minutes later, Brenda appeared in the kitchen, already dressed and ready to work. Good morning, Mr. Frank. I hope you don't mind me waking up early. I always wake with the sun. Not at all, Mrs. Brenda. I'm an early bird, too. Would you like some coffee? I accept, thank you. They drank coffee in silence for a few minutes, watching the sky lighten through the kitchen window. The plastic bottle construction was out there, waiting to be finished. Mr. Frank, can I ask a question? Of course. Have you ever thought about how many people could benefit from this technique if it really works? Frank smiled. Every day, Mrs. Brenda. Every day. And aren't you afraid of the responsibility? I am. Very much. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night thinking, what if it doesn't work? What if I'm giving these people false hope? And what do you do when you get scared? I come here to the construction site and remember why I started. I remember the families without homes, the children sleeping outdoors, the parents who work hard but can't save enough money for their own house. Brenda nodded understandingly. That's what I do too. When despair hits, I look at Tyler and remember, I need to be strong for him. It must be very difficult raising a child alone. It is, but it's also very rewarding. Tyler gives me the strength to keep going whenever I want to give up. Stephen appeared in the kitchen, already wearing work clothes. Good morning, everyone. Ready to make history? History? Brenda asked. Yes, Stephen said, pouring himself some coffee. If it works, this will be one of the first houses built with this technique in the US. In a few years, people might be writing articles about what we did here. Frank laughed. Stephen, don't exaggerate. It's just a house. Frank, you're underestimating what you're doing. A house built innovatively with recycled material at low cost, using a technique that can be easily taught. That's not just a house. That's a revolution. Mr. Arthur arrived in the kitchen at that moment. Did someone say revolution? I like it. I always wanted to be part of a revolution. Everyone laughed, and Frank felt fortunate to have gathered such positive people around his project. Well, everyone, shall we begin? Frank asked. Let's go, Brenda replied, finishing her coffee. But first, I wanted to propose something. What? How about we document the whole process? Film every step, take photos, Write down the instructions. That way, when we're done, we'll have a complete guide to teach other people. Stephen clapped his hands. Excellent idea. I can film. I have experience documenting social projects. And I can handle the technical notes, Chloe said, appearing in the kitchen, already dressed for work. Good morning, everyone. Frank was moved to see his daughter willing to actively participate in the project. Good morning, honey. Are you sure you want to help? I am. Last night I thought a lot about everything, and I realized I may have judged you without knowing the whole story. Chloe, you don't have to feel obligated. It's not an obligation, Dad. I really want to. I want to properly understand what you're doing, and I want to help if I can. Martha appeared in the kitchen carrying a basket of warm bread. Good morning, family. I went to the bakery early to get breakfast for everyone. Today is a day of hard work. Martha, you didn't have to, Brenda protested. Yes, I did. You are our guests, and besides, those who work well need to eat well. Tyler ran into the kitchen, already wearing clothes he could get dirty. Good morning. Can I start working now? Breakfast first, champ, his mother said. Then we'll work all day. That's so cool. I'm going to help build a real house. Tyler's excitement was contagious. Everyone sat at the table for breakfast, and the conversation revolved around the plans for the day. Mr. Arthur, what's the first thing we have to do? Chloe asked, taking a small notebook from her bag to take notes. First thing is to check if the structure we already have is level and sturdy. Then, we keep building up the walls. And how many bottles do we need to finish? Stephen asked. Frank did a quick calculation. About 1,000 more bottles. I have 300 stored in the shed, so we need 700. I know where to get them, Brenda said excitedly. Yesterday, while you all were talking, I took a walk around the neighborhood and saw a scrapyard 3 blocks from here. The owner told me he gets a lot of pet material and sells it cheap. Great, Frank smiled. So we have material, we have manpower, we have organization. All that's left... Left what? Martha asked. Is for it to work, Frank answered honestly. Brenda placed her hand on the table and looked at Frank with seriousness. Mr. Frank, you can rest assured it will work out. I believe in this idea so much that I'm betting my life on it. How so? I used the last $500 I had to make this trip here. If your technique doesn't work, I have nothing left. The weight of responsibility fell on Frank like a stone. Brenda had literally bet everything on his project. Brenda, you shouldn't have risked so much. Mr. Frank, when you have nothing, any risk is worth taking. And besides, it's not a risk if you're sure it will succeed. And you're sure? I am, she replied without hesitation, because I saw the dedication you put into this. I saw the technical knowledge. I saw the care with every detail. A person doesn't do all that if they aren't sure of what they're doing. Frank felt a mix of pride and pressure. It was good to know someone believed so much in the project, but at the same time he knew he couldn't let them down. After breakfast, everyone headed to the backyard where the construction awaited. The morning was beautiful, with strong sun but a pleasant breeze. It was a perfect day for work. All right, everyone, Frank spoke, taking on the role of coordinator. Let's divide the tasks. Mr. Arthur, you can help me with the technical part of the walls. Martha and Chloe, you can take care of organizing and sorting the bottles. Stephen, you're responsible for the documentation. Brenda, you learn by observing everything and sometimes help me with the fittings. Tyler, I can help everybody, the boy exclaimed. You can be our general assistant, Frank smiled. Bring materials, carry tools, and most importantly, keep everyone's spirits up. Cool. I'll be the official helper. During the first hours of work, Frank explained each step of the process to Brenda in detail. How to choose the right bottles, how to make the fittings, how to ensure the structure stays firm, how to calculate the spaces for doors and windows. Chloe took notes on everything, creating a veritable technical manual of the process. Martha organized the bottles by size and color, creating an efficient storage system. Stephen filmed the most important moments and took photos of each stage. Around 10 in the morning, Victor Sullivan appeared on the sidewalk in front of the house. He stopped and watched the activity, clearly curious about what was happening. "Frank!" he called from the gate. Frank stopped working and went to meet Victor, who was accompanied by 2 other men Frank didn't know. "Good morning, Victor." "Good morning. Listen, what is all this? Looks like you've become a contractor. Frank smiled. It's something like that. I'm teaching some people how to use the construction technique. One of the men accompanying Victor stepped forward. He was a tall fellow, about 40 years old, wearing expensive clothes with a businessman's demeanor. Excuse me, he introduced himself. My name is Justin Brooks. I'm a builder here in the region. Victor told me about your construction, and I came to see it in person. Frank greeted Justin politely, but felt a bit suspicious. Pleasure, Justin. How can I help you? Actually, I wanted to make you a proposal. What kind of proposal? Justin looked at the plastic bottle construction with obvious commercial interest. Look, Frank, I have a construction company that works with affordable housing. We're always looking for ways to lower costs while maintaining quality. Your technique could interest my clients. Frank felt a mental alarm. Justin spoke like a businessman, not like someone interested in helping people in need. And what would the proposal be? Simple. You sell me the technique, I register the patent, and we develop it commercially. You would receive a percentage of every house built. The silence that followed was tense. Frank looked at Brenda, who had stopped working to listen to the conversation. Justin, thank you for the offer, but I'm not interested in commercializing the technique. Not interested? Justin seemed genuinely surprised. Frank, this technique could be worth a lot of money. You could get rich from it. It's not a question of money. It's not a question of money, Victor interjected. Frank, are you telling me you don't want to make money from this project? I'm saying the goal of the project isn't to make money, Frank explained patiently. Justin laughed in disbelief. What's the goal then? To help people who need homes build their own houses. But you could help many more people if you turned this into a structured business, Justin argued, with corporate resources, marketing, mass production. And how much would a house like that cost in your corporate scheme? Brenda asked, moving closer to the group. Justin looked at Brenda as if assessing a potential client. It would depend on the size, location, finishes. I'd say between $15,000 and $20,000, which is very cheap for a house. $15,000, Brenda repeated. Mr. Justin, do you know how long it takes for a person earning minimum wage to save $15,000? I have no idea. About 10 years if they can save $100 a month, which is almost impossible when you need to pay rent, food, clothing, transportation, medicine. Justin began to grow impatient. Look, miss, I understand the social situation, but business is business. You can't work for free. Nobody's talking about working for free, Frank interjected. I'm talking about teaching a technique that people can use to build their own houses. And how much do you charge to teach it? Nothing. Justin and Victor exchanged a look as if Frank had spoken a word in a foreign language. Nothing? Victor repeated. Nothing. The idea is that one person learns and teaches others, who teach others, and so on. Frank, Justin said in a condescending tone, what you're talking about sounds very nice on paper, but it doesn't work in practice. People need financial incentives to make things work. Mr. Arthur, who had been listening to the conversation while working, decided to intervene. Excuse me, he approached the group. I'm Arthur. I've worked in construction for 30 years. Can I give my opinion? Of course, Justin replied, imagining he might find an ally. This young man, Justin, is wrong. The most important things in life don't work with financial incentives. A mother doesn't care for her child for money. A teacher doesn't teach for money. A friend doesn't help a friend for money. And a person doesn't build a house for another person for money when they see it's the right thing to do. Justin was clearly irritated. Mr. Arthur, with all due respect, that's romanticism. The real world runs on money. The real world? Arthur laughed. Son, I've lived in the real world for 60 years, and I can assure you that the best things I've ever seen in life were done by people who weren't thinking about money. Chloe approached the group holding her notepad. Excuse me, she said to Justin. You said your company works with affordable housing. How many families have you managed to assist? Well, that depends on various factors. Approved projects, funding. A simple answer. How many families has your company managed to get out of homelessness? Justin hesitated. Look, miss, our company works with affordable housing, but not exactly with homeless people. Our target audience has a slightly more structured income. Ah, Chloe noted something in her pad. So you don't exactly serve the audience my father wants to serve. Serve what? Victor asked. Families who truly have nowhere to live, Chloe explained. Families like Brenda's who lost everything and need to rebuild their lives from scratch. Justin looked at Brenda with a new interest, but not exactly compassionate. How did you lose your home, ma'am? Flood. Oh, did you have insurance? Mr. Justin, Brenda answered patiently, people who have money to pay for home insurance don't lose everything in a flood. Those who lose everything are the ones who never had any money left over to protect themselves. Brenda's answer exposed the total disconnect between Justin's reality and the reality of the people Frank wanted to help. Justin realized the conversation wasn't going where he had hoped. Well, Frank, the offer stands. If you change your mind about commercializing the technique, look me up. I'm sure we can make a good deal. Thank you, Justin. But as I said, I'm not interested. After Justin and Victor walked away, the team was a bit tense. Frank, Stephen spoke, do you think this Justin could cause problems? What kind of problems? I don't know. Try to patent the technique on his own or create legal obstacles to stop you from teaching people. Frank had never thought of that. The idea of someone trying to appropriate his technique for commercial purposes hadn't crossed his mind. Could he do that? He could try, Martha answered, but patenting is expensive and takes time, and besides, you've been using the technique for months. That should count in your favor. What if he tries to stop us from teaching others? Brenda approached Frank. Mr. Frank, don't let that man steal your sleep. You're doing the right thing for the right reason. People like this Justin will always show up wanting to profit from others' work. Brenda is right, Mr. Arthur agreed. Frank, do you think every great inventor in history didn't face people trying to steal their ideas? It's part of the process. Chloe closed her notebook with determination. Dad, you know what we're going to do? What? We're going to finish this house as quickly as possible, and we're going to document everything very well. That way, if anyone tries to appropriate the technique, we have proof of who developed it first and for what purpose. Stephen smiled at his niece. Chloe, you're thinking like a lawyer. I'm thinking like a daughter who won't let anyone harm my father's project. Frank felt a wave of pride. Seeing his daughter defending the project with such determination was worth more than any professional recognition. Everyone, shall we get back to work? He suggested. The best response for people like Justin is to show that our technique works. Let's go, Brenda agreed, and let's work with even more will to show that when people unite for a good goal, no one can stop them. The rest of the morning proceeded at a fast pace. The team worked with renewed determination, as if Justin's visit had increased the urgency to prove the technique worked. Around noon, when they stopped for lunch, the walls of the house had already risen considerably. The structure was starting to really look like a house, and that lifted the whole team's spirits. Look at that, Tyler exclaimed, admiring the work. It looks like a real house now. It is a real house, Frank corrected with a smile. And you helped build it. When it's finished, can I live in it? Brenda kissed her son's head. You can live in one just like it, that Mommy will build when she learns how properly. And where are we going to build our house? In New Orleans, where we lived before. Or maybe in another city if it's better for us. Frank realized he hadn't asked about Brenda and Tyler's future plans. Brenda, do you really plan to go back to New Orleans? It depends. If building there works out, yes. If it doesn't, we'll go wherever it does work out. And work? Tyler's school? Mr. Frank, when you lose everything, you learn that a home and a job and a school can be rebuilt anywhere. The important thing is to have a decent place to start over. The simplicity and wisdom of Brenda's words touched everyone at the table. Brenda, Martha spoke, have you ever thought about not going back to New Orleans? What do you mean? About staying here in the region. Indianapolis has job opportunities, good schools for Tyler. Brenda looked at Frank and Stephen before answering. Mrs. Martha, I would love to stay, but my goal isn't just to build a house for myself. It's to learn the technique so I can teach other families who are in the same situation I was in. And you can't do that here. There aren't as many people in that situation here. In New Orleans, there are dozens of families who lost everything, and are staying with others or in temporary shelters. Stephen nodded. It's true. The rebuilding work in New Orleans will take years. A lot of people need help there. Frank grew thoughtful. He had never considered the possibility of expanding the project to other regions so quickly. Stephen, do you think it would be possible to organize some kind of course there in New Orleans, to teach the technique to several people at once? I think so. City Hall and the state are looking for solutions to the housing problem. A cheap and effective technique would be very welcome. But Frank, Martha observed, that would mean you'd have to travel there. Not necessarily, Brenda interjected. If I learn it properly here, I can teach the first people there, and those people can teach others. Chloe stopped eating. Wait a minute, are you talking about creating a network of people teaching this technique in several cities? Why not? Mr. Arthur answered. If the technique is good and cheap, there's no reason for it to be restricted to just one city. That's huge, Chloe said slowly. It's exactly the size it needs to be, Frank replied. The problem of homelessness in Brazil is huge. The solution has to be the same size. Chloe looked at her father with an expression that mixed admiration and worry. Dad, do you realize you're talking about something that could impact thousands of people? I do, and it scares me every day. But doesn't it make you want to give up? No. It makes me want to get it right even more. Lunch continued with the conversation revolving around the possibilities of expanding the project. Stephen talked about other cities that had been affected by natural disasters. Mr. Arthur suggested adaptations of the technique for different climates. Brenda planned how she would organize the first families in New Orleans. Chloe kept taking notes, realizing she was documenting not just the construction of a house, but the planning of a social movement. Dad, she said when everyone had finished eating, I think I need to do more than just take notes. What do you mean? I think I need to help organize this properly. Do strategic planning, think about logistics, create a monitoring system. Frank looked at his daughter in surprise. Chloe, are you sure this could be a lot of work? Dad, if this is really as big as you all are saying, we can't just wing it. It needs professional organization. Brenda clapped her hands. Yes, Chloe. You could be our administrative coordinator. Our? Chloe asked. For the whole project, for all the people who will learn and teach the technique. Chloe looked around the table and saw everyone looking at her expectantly. Suddenly she realized she was no longer observing her father's project from the outside. She was being invited to be a real part of it. Okay, she answered slowly, but we'll have to do this right, with planning, goals, results tracking. Perfect, Frank smiled. Now the project has technique, skilled labor, field experience, and professional organization. And love, Tyler added. There's a lot of love too. Everyone laughed, but Frank realized Tyler had identified the most important ingredient of all. It was the love for strangers that drove the entire project. In the afternoon, when they returned to work, the atmosphere was even more positive. The team worked in perfect sync, each knowing exactly what their role was. Around 3 in the afternoon, an elderly woman approached the gate. It was Mrs. Gladys, the neighbor from the corner, who always made comments about Frank's construction. Frank, she called, can I talk to you? Frank stopped working and went to attend to Mrs. Gladys, imagining it might be another complaint about the construction. Hi, Mrs. Gladys. How can I help you? Frank, I came to apologize. The answer completely surprised Frank. Apologize for what, Mrs. Gladys? For saying you had lost your mind? For making jokes about your construction? This morning I talked to the young lady over there, she pointed to Brenda, and she explained to me what you all are doing. Frank looked at Brenda, who was smiling discreetly. And what do you think now? Now I think you are a very good man, Frank, and I wanted to know if you can teach me this technique too. Teach you? But you already have a house, Mrs. Gladys. I do, but my daughter doesn't. She separated from her husband 6 months ago and is living with me with her 2 little grandchildren. It's very cramped for all of us. Frank was moved by Mrs. Gladys's request. Of course, Mrs. Gladys. Whenever you want, you can come and learn. Can I bring my daughter too? You can bring whoever you want. Mrs. Gladys smiled and walked away, but not before saying, Frank, now I understand why your family was defending this project so much. You are doing something very important." After Mrs. Gladys walked away, Brenda approached Frank. "Mr. Frank, we talked this morning. She told me about her daughter's situation, and I explained how the project worked. She became very interested." "You did the right thing, Brenda. This project is for anyone who needs a house and is willing to learn." "You know what this means." "What?" "That we already have our first student right here in Indianapolis." Frank smiled. The project was growing organically, exactly as he had dreamed. The rest of the afternoon was marked by visits from other people in the neighborhood. Some came out of curiosity, others had heard about the project through Mrs. Gladys or other neighbors. A young couple who lived in a rental became interested in the technique. A retired lady wanted to learn to build a small house in the backyard for her son. With each visit, Frank patiently explained how the technique worked, what the approximate costs were, and how long it took to learn. Brenda and Mr. Barney complimented the explanations with practical details. Chloe noted down the name and contact of each interested person, starting to create a list of potential students. When the sun began to set, the team stopped work to evaluate the day's progress. The plastic bottle house was visibly more advanced. The walls were already high enough to provide privacy, and the structure was solid. "How long do you think it will take us to finish?" Stephen asked. Mr. Barney assessed the work with a technical eye. "If we continue at this pace, 1 more week and the structure will be ready. Then we need to do the roof, the floor, the electrical installations. 2 weeks total then," Frank calculated. "More or less," Barney confirmed. Tyler ran to the construction and lay down on the ground, inside the space that would be the living room. "Look, Mom, I'm inside the house." Brenda laughed and lay down next to her son. "It's true. We already have our first house." Frank, Martha, Chloe, Stephen, and Arthur joined them, all lying on the floor of the future house and looking at the darkening sky. "You know something?" Chloe spoke. "I never thought I'd lie on the floor of a house made of plastic bottles." "And what do you think now?" Frank asked. "I think it's the most special house I've ever seen in my life." "Why?" "Because it was made with a lot of love and a lot of hope." Tyler sat in the middle of the group. "Uncle Frank, when I grow up, I'm going to build houses just like this for other kids." "Yes, you will, champ," Frank replied, his eyes misty. "And you're going to be very good at it." They stayed there for a few minutes, in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Martha thought about how her husband had managed to turn a seemingly impossible dream into reality. Chloe thought about all the families who could benefit from the project. Brenda thought about the house she would build for herself and Tyler. Stephen thought about all the communities he could help. Mr. Arthur thought about how many years of construction experience were finally being used for something truly important. And Frank thought about how life could change completely when you have the courage to do the right thing, even when everyone thinks you're crazy. That night during dinner, the conversation revolved around plans for the rest of the week. Chloe had organized a work schedule that would optimize everyone's time. Stephen planned to film some testimonials from Brenda and Mr. Arthur about their expectations for the project. Martha thought about how to improve the food logistics for the team. "Everyone," Frank said, "I want to thank you once again for everything you're doing." "Frank, stop thanking us," Martha laughed. "We're doing this because we want to, because we believe in the project." "And because it's fun," Tyler added. "I've never had so much fun building something." "It's true," Brenda agreed. "Yesterday I was without a home and without prospects. Today I'm learning to build my own house and already planning how I'll teach other people. It's amazing how life can change fast when the right people appear." Chloe looked at her father. "Dad, do you remember when I was little and I asked what your job was and you always said you built houses for people to live in?" "I remember. I never really understood what that meant. I thought you just stacked bricks. Now I understand that building a house is much more than that." "How so?" "Building a house is building hope, right? It's giving people the foundation to rebuild their lives." Frank was moved by his daughter's words. "That's exactly it, Chloe. A house isn't just a place to shelter from the rain. It's a place where a person can dream about the future. And that's why this project is so important," Stephen observed. "Because you're not just teaching construction techniques. You're teaching people to dream again. Brenda held Tyler's hand on the table. It's true. When I lost my house, I also lost hope that things could get better. Now I know they can. And I'll make sure to pass that hope on to other families when I go back to New Orleans. And I'll help, Tyler exclaimed. I'll be Mom's official assistant. Everyone laughed, but Frank realized Tyler was serious. The boy had found in this whole process a way to help his mother and other people. It was a lesson in citizenship that no school could teach. Tyler, he said, do you want to know a secret? Yes. You're already helping a lot, even though you're a kid. Do you know why? No. Because you're showing all of us that it's possible to be happy and hopeful, even when things get tough. That's very important. Tyler smiled proudly. So I'm really useful? Very useful, Frank replied. You're living proof that this project works. How so? A construction technique only truly works if families are happy in the homes they build, and seeing you happy, we know our technique is good. The conversation went on late into that night. It was as if everyone knew they were living through something special and wanted to savor every moment. When they finally went to sleep, Frank lay awake for a long time, looking out the window at his plastic bottle construction illuminated by the streetlight. In a week, his life had completely changed. He had gone from a lonely, misunderstood man to the leader of a team united by a common goal. More importantly, he had finally proven to himself that his idea worked, not just technically but humanly. The project was changing the lives of real people, and those people were willing to spread the change to others. It was exactly what he had dreamed of when he started the construction months ago. But now it was no longer just a dream. It was reality, and reality was turning out to be much better than the dream. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. On Sunday morning, Frank woke to the sound of voices coming from the backyard. When he looked out the window, he saw that Mrs. Gladys was at the construction site with her daughter and her 2 young grandsons, while Brenda explained details of the building technique. He dressed quickly and went to join the group. Mrs. Gladys's daughter, a woman of about 35 named Megan, watched everything attentively while her 5-year-old twin sons played among the plastic bottles. Good morning, everyone, Frank greeted. Good morning, Frank, Mrs. Gladys replied. I hope you don't mind. Megan was eager to see the project, and since it's Sunday... Not at all, Mrs. Gladys. Everyone is welcome. Megan approached Frank with a shy smile. Nice to meet you, Mr. Frank. My mother told me about your project. Is it true anyone can learn? Of course, Megan. You don't need any prior construction experience. The technique is very simple. And is it really cheap? Very cheap. The biggest cost is the plastic bottles, and even that isn't expensive. Megan looked at her sons playing. Mr. Frank, I work as a nursing assistant. I earn 1.5 minimum wage. After paying for daycare, food, clothes for the kids, there's never anything left to pay rent for a house of our own. Frank understood Megan's situation perfectly. She was exactly the kind of person his project was designed for. Megan, if you want to learn, we can start teaching you today. Today? But it's Sunday. Building a house doesn't have a day of the week. Mr. Arthur appeared, already carrying tools. Good morning, everyone. Shall we get to work? The twins ran to Mr. Arthur, who had become a sort of grandfather to Tyler and was clearly loving the children's company. Grandpa Arthur, they shouted in unison. Whoa, whoa, you're my little grandsons now too. He laughed, picking one up in each arm. Great, now we have 3 official assistants. Martha appeared with a tray of coffee and bread for everyone. Good morning, Megan. Welcome to the craziest and most beautiful project in the neighborhood. Thank you, Mrs. Martha. Your family is very generous. Generous, nothing. Chloe appeared, already dressed for work. We're smart. The more people learn the technique, the faster it spreads. Stephen was filming the arrival of the new people, documenting how the project grew naturally through word of mouth. Megan, he asked, how did you hear about the project? Through my mother. She mentioned that the neighbor was teaching how to build cheap, good houses. Since I really need a house, I came to see if it was true. And what do you think so far? Megan looked at the construction, which was much more advanced than the first time Mrs. Gladys had seen it. I think it's incredible. It looks like a normal house, but I know it was made with material that would be trash. Does that bother you? Stephen continued filming. What bothers me is living as a guest in my mother's house with 2 small children. If this technique can give me my own home, I don't care if it's made with plastic bottles, cardboard, or anything else. Megan's sincerity moved everyone present. Megan, Brenda approached. Would you like to start by learning how to select and prepare the bottles? Yes, I would. All Sunday morning, Frank's family's backyard turned into an impromptu school. Megan learned by watching and practicing. Mrs. Gladys helped by organizing materials. The twins played with Tyler under the supervision of Mr. Arthur, who managed to both entertain the children and work on the construction. Around 10 in the morning, another neighbor appeared. It was Johnny, a retiree of about 70, who lived alone 3 blocks away. Excuse me, everyone. He approached the gate timidly. Can I take a look at this construction everyone is talking about? Of course, Mr. Johnny. Frank invited him in. Make yourself at home. Johnny walked slowly to the construction, observing every detail with experienced eyes. Boy, what interesting engineering. I worked 40 years in a cement block factory, and I've never seen anything like this. What do you think about the strength? Mr. Arthur asked. Johnny tapped on the plastic bottle wall with his knuckles, testing its firmness. Seems solid, very solid even, and it must be warm in the winter and cool in the summer because of the air inside the bottles. Exactly, Frank perked up. Thermal insulation is one of the big advantages of the technique. And how much does a house like this cost? It depends on the size, but a small house like this should be around $2,000 in materials. Johnny whistled softly. $2,000? Boy, that's less than a minimum wage. That's the goal, Brenda explained, to enable people with little money to have their own home. Johnny was thoughtful for a few moments. And do you teach this technique? Yes, I do, Mr. Johnny. Do you want to learn? Megan asked. Oh, I don't know, miss. At my age isn't a problem, Mr. Arthur interjected. I'm 60 years old and I'm learning new things here every day. It's different. You all have families to build a house for. I live alone. I don't need a bigger house. Chloe stopped taking notes and looked at Johnny. Mr. Johnny, have you ever thought about teaching the technique to other people? How so? You have experience in construction. You have free time because you're retired. You could learn here and then teach other people in need. Johnny seemed interested in the idea. Teach other people, how so? I'm going to do that too, Brenda explained. I'm going to learn here and then teach families in New Orleans who lost their homes in the flood. Oh, I see, Johnny nodded. Become a teacher of the technique. Exactly, Frank confirmed. The goal isn't just for each person to build their own house, but for each person who learns to teach others. I like the idea, Johnny smiled. I always liked teaching. At the factory, I was the one who trained the new employees. Then it's decided. Chloe wrote Johnny's name on the list. Another teacher for our team. Tyler ran up to Johnny. Grandpa Johnny, are you going to build a house with us? Yes, I am, my little grandson. I'm going to learn to build so I can teach other grandpas who need a home. The morning continued with a lot of work and a lot of learning. Megan proved to be a dedicated student, asking smart questions and carrying out the tasks with great care. Johnny, despite his age, showed impressive physical and mental vigor, contributing suggestions based on his long experience in construction. Around noon, when they stopped for lunch, Frank counted 9 people working on his build: himself, Martha, Chloe, Stephen, Brenda, Tyler, Mr. Arthur, Megan, and Johnny. Mrs. Gladys helped by serving water and organizing tools. The twins were playing but also helping by carrying small things. Everyone, Frank got the group's attention. I need to say something. Everyone stopped what they were doing to listen. When I started this build 4 months ago, I was alone, sad, not even believed in by my own family. I thought I had a good idea, but I didn't know if it would work. And now? Brenda asked. Now I know the idea isn't just good, it's necessary. And more importantly, I know I'm not alone anymore. Chloe moved closer to her father. Dad, you were never alone. We just didn't understand what you were doing. And now you understand? We understand and we want to help, Martha answered. Not just to finish this house, but to teach the technique to as many people as want to learn. Stephen smiled at his brother. Frank, do you remember when we were kids and we played at Changing the World? I do. I think we weren't playing. We were rehearsing. Lunch was a celebration. Martha had prepared a big pot of chili with the help of Megan and Mrs. Gladys. The children ate and played at the same time. The adults planned the next steps of the project. Guys, Chloe said, I did some math here. If each person who's learning the technique teaches 5 other people, and those 5 each teach 5 more, how many people does that become? Tyler asked. In 3 generations of teaching, 375 people would have learned the technique. 375 families with their own homes, Brenda calculated. 375 families who wouldn't have to pay rent or live with others anymore. Megan finished. Johnny clapped. That's a revolution. A peaceful and constructive revolution. Mr. Arthur laughed. I said I wanted to be part of a revolution. Now I know what kind of revolution it was. In the afternoon, the work was even more productive. The team had developed perfect synchronicity. Each person knew exactly what their role was, and the tasks flowed naturally. Around 3 in the afternoon, an official car from City Hall stopped in front of the house. 2 men in suits got out and walked to the gate with a formal air. Good afternoon, one of them said. We're looking for Mr. Frank Harrison. Frank wiped his hands on his shirt and approached. That's me. How can I help you? I'm Raymond, from the City Hall's Department of Housing. This is Engineer Greg, from the Department of Public Works. We've come to check on your construction. Frank's heart raced. He imagined someone had reported his build. Check in what sense? We received information that you are developing an alternative construction technique. We've come to see if there are any irregularities or if you need any special permits. Frank breathed a sigh of relief. It wasn't a punitive inspection, but an investigative one. Feel free to examine everything. The construction is being done within technical and legal standards. Engineer Greg approached the plastic bottle house with professional interest. Interesting. I've never seen a structure like this. May I examine it more closely? Of course. While Greg technically examined the construction, Secretary Raymond talked with Frank about the project. Mr. Frank, is it true that you are teaching this technique to other people? Yes, it is, without charging anything. And what is the objective? Helping people who need housing but don't have the resources to buy or build a traditional home. Raymond was jotting everything down in a little notebook. Do you have data on costs, construction time, material resistance? Chloe approached with her notepad. I have all the data organized here. I can show you. Victor, who had finished examining the structure, returned to the group. Mr. Frank, I must congratulate you. This structure is extremely well built. The way the bottles interlock distributes the weight intelligently, the thermal insulation must be excellent, and the strength is comparable to a brick wall. Frank felt immense relief. Thank you, Engineer Victor. Not only that, Victor continued, but from what I've observed, this technique could be very useful for our housing programs. Raymond nodded. That's exactly what I was thinking. Mr. Frank, City Hall is interested in learning more about your project. What kind of interest? Interest in a possible partnership. We could provide the land. You would provide the construction technique. Together, we could serve families who have been on the waiting list for affordable housing for years. The proposal left Frank and the whole team surprised. An official partnership with City Hall? Brenda asked. Why not? Raymond replied. If the technique is good, cheap, and can be easily taught, it's exactly what we need. Chloe opened her notebook. What kind of partnership are you thinking of? It's too early for details, Victor explained, but the basic idea would be City Hall provides land and basic infrastructure. You teach families how to build their own homes using this technique. And how much would the families pay? Much less than they would for a traditional house, maybe just the cost of materials and legal fees. Frank looked at Stephen, then at Brenda, then at the whole team who had stopped working to listen to the conversation. Would it be an official City Hall program? It could be. We'd have to do some studies, get approval from the council, but technically it's feasible. Megan approached the group. Are you talking about a program that would teach needy families to build their own houses? That's exactly it, Raymond confirmed. And could I participate? Of course. In fact, families like yours would be a priority. Megan began to cry. It was the first time in months she saw a concrete possibility of having her own home for herself and her children. "Mrs. Megan, no need to cry," Engineer Victor said gently. "If all goes well, in a few months you could be building your house." "It's the emotion," Megan explained, wiping away tears. "I never thought I could have my own house one day." Raymond closed his little notebook. "Mr. Frank, can we schedule a more formal meeting at City Hall?" "Of course, whenever you want." "How about next Friday at 2 in the afternoon? Perfect." After the City Hall representatives walked away, the team was in a state of euphoria. "Guys," Chloe exclaimed, "do you realize what this means? It means Dad's project could become public policy," she answered herself. "Public policy?" Tyler asked. "It means City Hall is going to help Mr. Frank teach many families to build their houses," Brenda explained to her son. "That's so cool. We'll teach the whole city." Johnny shook his head in admiration. "Frank, man, you started out alone building a house in the backyard and now you might be creating an official city program. This is like something out of a movie." "It's better than a movie," Mr. Arthur observed. "It's real life for real people who are going to get real houses." Frank was visibly moved. "Everyone, I don't even know what to say. When I started this, I just wanted to prove the technique worked. Now you can help hundreds of families," Stephen completed. "Thousands," Chloe corrected, consulting her notebook. "If it becomes public policy, it can help thousands of families over the years." The rest of the afternoon passed in a festive mood. Everyone worked with renewed enthusiasm, knowing they were participating in building something that could change many lives. Around 5 in the afternoon, the basic structure of the house was practically ready. Only the roof and interior finishes were left. "Everyone," Frank announced, "I think this is a good time to stop and celebrate." "Celebrate what?" Tyler asked. "Celebrate that we managed to prove the technique works, that people can learn it, and that it's possible to help a lot of people with this." Martha brought soda and cake for everyone. Mrs. Gladys ran home to fetch a bottle of champagne she had been saving for years. "Let's make a toast," she announced. "A toast to what?" Megan asked. "To Frank, who had the courage to do things differently," Brenda suggested. "To the project which showed it's possible to help people," Stephen added. "To our team which proved that together we are stronger," Chloe completed. "To the future, which now looks much better for a lot of people," Mr. Arthur concluded. Everyone toasted, including the children with soda. It was a moment of pure joy and hope. "Tyler," Frank crouched down to the boy's level, "do you know you'll be able to tell your children that you helped build the first house of the project that changed the lives of many families?" "Really?" Tyler perked up. "Yes, really. You've been part of the story from the beginning." "That's so cool. Am I going to be famous?" "You'll be better than famous," Frank smiled. "You'll be a person who helped other people." When the sun set that Sunday, the plastic bottle house was almost ready. The team had grown to more than 10 people, and the project had gained official recognition from City Hall. But for Frank, the most important thing was seeing the smile on the faces of people like Brenda, Megan, and Johnny. It was knowing that his idea had left the drawing board and become a reality in the lives of real people. That night, during the dinner that stretched late with so many guests, Frank looked around the table and saw something he had never imagined when he started the construction, a community of people united by a common goal. "Everyone," he said, getting everyone's attention, "I want you to know these have been the happiest days of my life." "Why, Uncle Frank?" Tyler asked. "Because I discovered my idea wasn't just mine. It was all of yours too. And when an idea belongs to many people, it becomes much stronger. And much more beautiful," Brenda added. "And much more possible," Megan completed. "And much more necessary," Stephen concluded. Chloe got up from her chair and hugged her father. "Dad, I'm so sorry it took me so long to understand what you were doing. Chloe, you understood at the right time. If you had understood earlier, maybe you wouldn't have questioned so much, and the questions you asked helped me make the project better." "How so?" "Your concerns about organization, planning, cost control, all of that was necessary for the project to really work. You weren't being negative. You were being careful." "And now?" Chloe asked. Do you think I'm being useful? Chloe, Martha answered for the family, you've become the backbone of the project. Without your organization, none of this would be working so well. It's true, Brenda agreed. Chloe, you turned a beautiful dream into a viable project. Chloe was moved by the recognition. Thank you, everyone. I never thought I'd get so interested in construction. You didn't get interested in construction, Stephen observed. You got interested in building lives. It's different. The conversation continued until almost midnight. When everyone finally said goodbye and went to sleep, Frank stayed alone in the backyard for a few minutes, looking at his plastic bottle house. In a week, it had gone from being just an experimental construction to becoming the symbol of a movement. In a week, he had gone from being an isolated man with a strange idea to becoming the leader of a team determined to change the housing reality of their community. But the most incredible thing of all was that this was just the beginning. The following Monday, when Frank woke up, he found a line of people at his door. They were neighbors who had heard about the project and wanted to learn the technique. "Good morning, everyone," he greeted, still a bit sleepy. "You're here early." "Mr. Frank," a lady named Esther spoke for the group. "We heard you teach how to build cheap houses. Is it true?" "It's true, Mrs. Esther. But can we learn?" Frank looked at the line of about 15 people and realized his backyard wouldn't be enough for so many. "Yes, you can, but we'll have to get organized. Let me talk with my team, and we'll schedule times for everyone." Chloe appeared at the door, already with her notebook in hand. "Dad, I think we'd better have a meeting tonight to plan how to handle so many interested people." "Good idea," Frank agreed. "Everyone," he addressed the line. "Tonight, at 7 o'clock, we'll have a meeting here in the backyard to explain how the project works and organize the classes. Everyone is invited." The line dispersed excitedly, with people arranging to come back in the evening. "Chloe," Frank asked his daughter, "do you have any idea what's happening?" "I do, Dad. The project is going viral." "Going viral?" "It's a term we use for when something spreads really fast, like a virus, but a good virus." Frank laughed, remembering the comparison Tyler had made a few days before. "So we're a good virus?" "The best virus possible," Chloe confirmed. "A virus that spreads knowledge and hope." During the day, Frank received calls from other neighborhoods, other cities, and even from journalists wanting to learn about the project. Stephen documented everything, creating a historical archive of the initiative's growth. That night, Frank's backyard was packed. More than 50 people had come to the meeting. Brenda, Megan, Johnny, and Mr. Arthur helped Frank explain the technique and organize learning groups. "Everyone," Frank spoke to the crowd, "it's amazing to see so much interest in the project. But I need to explain something important. It's not just about learning to build a house. It's about creating a network of people who help each other." "How so?" someone asked. "Each person who learns commits to teaching others. That way, knowledge multiplies and reaches those who really need it." A young woman of about 25 raised her hand. "My name is Paula. I'm a social worker, and I work with underprivileged families. Can I take this knowledge to my work?" "Of course, Paula. In fact, that would be ideal." "And I'm a teacher in the municipal system," a man introduced himself. "Can I teach the technique to my students as a citizenship project?" "Perfect." Frank became animated. "Every professional field can adapt the project to their reality." Chloe stood up. "Everyone, to organize everything properly, I'm going to pass around a list for you to write down your name, contact information, and when you can participate in the classes. We're going to create small groups so everyone can learn well." The meeting went on until late, but ended with all interested parties organized into learning groups. Brenda volunteered to coordinate a group of single mothers. Johnny took charge of the retirees group. Megan would organize a group of employees from the hospital where she worked. When everyone had left, the original team gathered to assess what had happened. "Folks," Stephen spoke, "do you realize that in 1 week, this project grew from one family to an entire community?" "And on Friday, we have a meeting at City Hall," Chloe reminded them. "If it works out, it could grow even more." "Frank," Martha took her husband's hand, "are you prepared for all this responsibility?" Frank looked at his wife, then at his daughter, then at Brenda and Tyler, then at Stephen and Mr. Arthur. Alone I wouldn't be, but with you all by my side I feel capable of anything. Then let's move forward, Brenda said with determination. Let's show the whole world that it's possible to do things differently when we unite for a just cause. On Friday, the meeting at City Hall was a success. Frank, Chloe, Brenda and Stephen presented the complete project to a committee of municipal department heads. The partnership proposal was approved unanimously, and in 2 months the first official low-income housing program using the plastic bottle technique would begin. But for Frank, the real success had already happened. It was in the nearly finished house in his backyard. It was in the smiles of Brenda and Tyler. It was in the pride shining in Chloe's eyes. It was in Marlene's unconditional support. It was in knowing that an idea born from the pain of being laid off had turned into hope for dozens of families. It was in proving to himself and to the world that it's never too late to do the right thing, even when everyone thinks you're crazy. It was in discovering that the best way to build your own happiness is by helping other people build theirs. And it was in knowing that, when it all began, the neighbors laughed at his house made of plastic bottles until they discovered the reason behind it. The reason was the simplest and most powerful of all: love for one's neighbor transformed into concrete action. End of story. So, dear listener, what did you think of this moving story of overcoming and solidarity? Tell us in the comments which part touched your heart the most. Do you know someone who, like Frank, had the courage to do things differently, even while being criticized? Have you ever been in a situation where a small action led to big changes? Share your experience with us. And if you liked this story of love for one's neighbor and determination, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other stories that will move and inspire your day.